They thought I would forgive them. They didn't know I was already planning. Every smile they gave me was a lie. Every apology was too late, and I made sure they paid for it. The rain didn't just fall that day. It felt like the sky was collapsing on me. Cold, heavy drops smashed against the windshield as I sat in my car outside the house I once called home. The wipers moved back and forth like they were trying to erase more than just water, like they were trying to erase memories I could no longer escape. But nothing could erase what I had just seen. Inside that house, behind those cream-colored curtains I had personally picked out years ago, my world had ended in silence. I still remember every detail, the faint golden glow of the hallway light, the smell of vanilla candles my wife used to love, and the sound of laughter that didn't belong to me anymore. I came home early. That was my mistake. Or maybe my fate. Because if I had arrived 5 minutes later, I might still be living a lie. I saw them through the slightly open living room door. My wife, Lena, standing too close to him. And him, my best friend since college. Armin, the man who had eaten at my table, prayed in my home, and called me brother. There was no argument, no explanation needed. The truth was written in their silence, in the way they jumped apart too late, in the way Lena's eyes froze when she saw me. But what broke me wasn't just betrayal. It was how calm she looked after the shock faded, like she had been preparing for this moment, like I was the interruption, not the husband. I didn't scream. I didn't ask questions. I just turned around and walked out, and that silence followed me into the rain. I didn't know how long I sat in the car. Minutes. Hours. Time stopped existing the moment my heart cracked in half. Every memory replayed itself violently. Her smile when I proposed. The way she held my hand during our wedding vows. The night she said, "You're my forever." Was it all rehearsed? Was I just a chapter they were both waiting to close? My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't weak, but I felt like something inside me had been surgically removed without anesthesia. And in that emptiness, something else began to grow. Not sadness, not confusion. Something colder. Something quieter. Something dangerous. I drove without knowing where I was going. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red as the rain turned heavier. Karachi never slept, but tonight it felt like the entire world was awake except me. I stopped near the river bridge. The water below was dark, restless, endless, just like my thoughts. For a moment, I thought about ending everything. It would be easy. One step, one fall. No more pain, no more betrayal. But then I remembered something Armin once said during a casual conversation at dinner. Some people forgive too easily. That's why they keep getting broken. I laughed at that memory. Not because it was funny, because it suddenly made sense in the worst possible way. I wasn't going to forgive. Not this time. When I finally returned home after midnight, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Lena was sitting on the couch like she had been waiting for me. Her hair was slightly messy, her face pale, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked nervous, not guilty, just afraid of consequences. "Where were you?" she asked softly. I didn't answer immediately. I closed the door behind me and stood there for a moment, just watching her. The woman I had built my life around. The woman I had defended in every argument. The woman I trusted more than myself. And now a stranger. "I saw you," I finally said. Her breath caught. For a second, her mask cracked. Then she stood up slowly. "It's not what you think." That sentence, that tired, recycled sentence, it almost made me laugh again. "Then explain it," I said quietly. Silence. Even the walls seemed to lean in to listen. But she didn't explain. Because there was nothing to explain. Or maybe because the truth would destroy whatever fragile control she still had over me. Instead, she said something worse. "I was going to tell you." That was the moment something inside me shut down completely. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just decision. Finality. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. And I walked past her. She turned, confused. "Where are you going?" I paused at the stairs. And for the first time, I let my voice turn completely calm. "Nowhere," I said. "But things are going to change." She didn't understand. Not yet. But I did. Because forgiveness wasn't going to be part of my story. Revenge was. And they had no idea what kind of man they had just created. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, staring at old documents, bank records, shared investments, everything that connected us. And slowly, carefully, I began to see the structure of my life like a system. Weak points, dependencies, secrets, and opportunities. If betrayal had taught me anything, it was this. People don't fear anger. They fear consequences. And I was done being the man who forgives. From now on, I would be the man they underestimated. Morning came like nothing had changed. The sun rose over Karachi in soft, in different shades of gold, as if the world had no idea mine had shattered the night before. Birds still flew. Streets still filled. Life still pretended to be normal. But inside me, nothing was normal anymore. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I sat in my study chair the entire night, watching the slow blinking light of my laptop screen as I opened every file tied to my life with Lena. Bank accounts, property papers, investments, joint assets, the kind of documents couples sign without thinking about the day they might stop being a couple. And as I went through them, something became painfully clear. I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. I was exposed financially. Small transfers at first, then patterns, then names I didn't recognize. Armin's name appeared once, then again, not directly in transfers, but in indirect connections, business consultations, shared projects. My jaw tightened. So it wasn't just betrayal. It was preparation. They had been building something behind me while I was still playing husband. And I had been blind. At 7:12 a.m., I finally stood up. My reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar. Eyes tired, face sharp, expression empty. Not broken, refined, like something had burned away all softness. I made tea I didn't drink. I just needed something warm in my hands to remind me I was still human. My phone buzzed. Lena. I stared at her name for a long moment. Then I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up another phone. An old one. One she didn't know I still had. And I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Meet me, I said. Today. No greeting. No explanation. Just that. By noon, I was sitting in a small office above a quiet commercial street. The fan above clicked in uneven rhythm. The air smelled like dust and old files. Across from me sat Harris, a corporate auditor I once worked with years ago before I built my own company. A man who understood numbers the way doctors understand blood. He looked at me carefully. You look like Hal, he said. I didn't smile. I need you to trace money, I said. That made him sit forward. I slid a USB drive across the table. Everything I own. Everything shared. I want every movement. Every hidden account. Every pattern. Harris frowned. This sounds personal. It is. A pause. Then he nodded slowly. Give me 48 hours. I stood up immediately. 24. He raised an eyebrow. You're not the only one who doesn't sleep, I added. And for the first time that day, he stopped questioning me. When I left the office, the city felt different. Not bigger. Not louder. Just clearer. Like I was finally seeing the structure beneath everything. People think revenge is emotional. It isn't. It's technical. It's patience. It's timing. And most of all, it's information. That evening, I went home. The house looked the same, but I didn't. Lena was in the kitchen when I walked in. She turned immediately, like she had been waiting all day just to catch my eyes. You ignored me, she said. Her voice carried frustration now, not guilt. That bothered me more than anything. I was busy, I replied calmly. With what? She asked. I opened the fridge, took out water, and closed it again. Fixing things. She stepped closer. We need to talk. I finally looked at her, and something in my expression must have unsettled her because she stopped walking. There's nothing to talk about, I said. Her voice sharpened. You're acting like I committed a crime. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said quietly, didn't you? Silence hit the room instantly. The clock ticking on the wall suddenly felt louder. She swallowed. Then her voice dropped. It didn't mean anything. That line again. The same hollow defense people use when they want consequences to disappear. I nodded slowly. Interesting, I said. Then I walked past her. But before I left the room, I added one thing. Some things don't need meaning. They just need consequences. I didn't look back, but I felt her staring at me long after I left. That night, I received a message from Harris. Just 3 words. You were right. My grip tightened on the phone. Another message followed. A file attachment. And a single sentence. You should see this immediately. I opened it, and my entire body went still. Transactions I had never authorized. A secondary account opened under my name. And then, a property transfer. Signed digitally. Approved recently. To a company I had never heard of. My pulse slowed. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was theft. Systematic. Deliberate. And legally structured. Lena wasn't just cheating on me. She was dismantling me. Piece by piece. And as I stared at the screen in the dark silence of my study, I finally understood something terrifying. This was never about emotions. This was war. And I wasn't the only one fighting it. At 2:03 a.m., my phone lit up again. Unknown number. One message. Only 4 words. You should stop. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back slowly. Too late. And outside my window, a car engine started that didn't belong to me. The message stayed on my screen longer than it should have. You should stop. 4 words. No name. No signature. No traceable number. But it didn't feel like a warning from a stranger. It felt personal. Like someone had been watching me long before I realized I was being watched. Outside my window, the engine noise faded slowly into the distance. But the message left behind a heavier silence, one that pressed against my chest like a warning I couldn't ignore. I didn't delete it. I didn't reply. I just studied it. Because by now, I had learned something important. People don't threaten what they don't fear losing. And whoever sent this feared something. Morning came without rest again. My world had become a cycle of no sleep, no peace, only movement. At 9 a.m., Harris called. I found something, he said immediately. No greeting, no hesitation, just urgency. I grabbed my keys. I'm coming. His office looked different this time. Less dusty, more tense. Files were spread across the table like a crime scene that hadn't been cleaned up yet. Harris didn't waste time. He slid a folder toward me. Your money didn't just move, he said. It was structured. I opened it, and my stomach tightened. Layers of transactions. Shell companies. Offshore links. Rerouted investments. This wasn't a simple betrayal between a husband and wife. This was organized financial manipulation. And then I saw it. A name repeated in the network. Not Lena. Not Armin. Someone else. Zion Khan. Harris watched my reaction carefully. You know him, he asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because I did know him. Or at least, I thought I did. Zion Khan wasn't a friend. He wasn't family. He was something worse. He was someone I had once trusted with business advice. A consultant who helped me expand my company 2 years ago. Calm. Polished. Always speaking in measured tones. The kind of man who never raised suspicion because he never needed to. I worked with him, I said slowly. Harris nodded. He's at the center of this structure. Not just assisting, leading. My throat tightened slightly. So Lena wasn't acting alone, I said. Harris looked at me seriously. No, he said. She was guided. That word hit harder than betrayal. Guided. Controlled. Used. And suddenly, everything shifted. Lena wasn't the mastermind. She was a piece. And I had been focused on the wrong target. By the time I left Harris's office, the city felt colder. Not weather-wise. Emotionally. Like something hidden had just stepped closer. I drove without music. Without calls. Just silence and thought. Zion Khan. Why? Why me? And then the answer came slowly. Not as certainty, but as pattern recognition. My company had recently won a major international contract. One that Zion had also been competing for through another firm. And I had outbid him. Cleanly. Legally. But in business, losing clean doesn't mean accepting defeat. Sometimes it means planning something quieter. More patient. More destructive. When I reached home, Lena was waiting again. But she wasn't alone. Armin was there. Sitting in my living room like he still belonged. That sight hit differently this time. Not shock. Not rage. Something colder. Final confirmation. Lena stood quickly when she saw me. We need to fix this, she said immediately. Armin didn't speak at first. He just watched me carefully. Measuring. Waiting. I looked at both of them. Then I said something I didn't expect even myself to say. This isn't about fixing. Lena frowned. Then what is it about? I stepped inside slowly, and for the first time I smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, just enough for them to feel it. It's about understanding who built what and who's going to lose it. Armin stood up now. Listen, he said carefully. This is getting out of control. I looked at him, and for a moment, I remembered everything. The friendship, the trust, the years, and how easily all of it had been turned into betrayal. You're right, I said. He relaxed slightly. Then I added, it already is out of control. Silence. Lena stepped forward. We can fix this privately. No one needs to know. That line again. Hide it. Fix it. Erase it. Like consequences are just inconvenience. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. Her voice cracked slightly. What do you want then? And for the first time, I said it clearly. I want truth. That made both of them still. Because truth wasn't part of their plan. That night, after they left, I sat alone again. But this time, something had changed. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was mapping. Because Harris was right. Zion wasn't just involved. He was leading. Which meant Lena and Armin weren't the real threat. They were the surface. The visible damage. But underneath, there was a system. And systems don't collapse with emotion. They collapse with precision. My laptop screen lit up again. A new file from Harris. Title: Hidden Beneficiaries. I opened it and froze because there was one more name in the network. A silent shareholder. A ghost partner. Someone I had never seen before, but whose signature appeared in the most critical layer of the structure. And next to it, a photograph. My breath slowed because I recognized her instantly. And for the first time since this began, I felt something I hadn't felt yet. Not betrayal. Not anger. Not sadness. Fear. I stared at the photograph longer than I should have. The face looked calm. Controlled. Almost elegant in a way that made everything worse. Because I knew her. Not as a stranger. Not as an enemy. But as someone from a chapter of my life I thought I had buried years ago. Syra Malik. My former mentor's daughter. And the only person I ever trusted with my early business blueprints before I built my company. The one who disappeared from the industry after a sudden scandal involving corporate fraud allegations. A scandal I never understood at the time. Now it all felt like pieces sliding into place. My fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. Harris was watching me carefully across the table. You recognize her, he said. I didn't answer immediately. Because recognition wasn't the problem. The problem was what it meant. She used to be in my circle, I said finally. Harris leaned back slightly. She's not just in the circle now. She's the structure behind it. A silence fell between us. Only the ticking fan filled the room. Then he pushed another file toward me. She doesn't appear directly in transactions, he continued. But she controls the routing. The layers under layers. Zion Khan is the face. She is the architecture. I exhaled slowly. So this was it. Not a betrayal of love, not even a betrayal of friendship. This was engineered, designed, long-term execution. Outside, the sky had turned gray again. Karachi always felt like it knew when something inside you had broken. It matched your mood without permission. I drove back home in silence. Not anger anymore. Something sharper. Focus. Because anger burns. Focus builds. And what I needed now was construction, not destruction. When I reached the house, the atmosphere felt different again. Too quiet. Too staged. Lena was sitting alone in the living room. Armin was gone. That alone told me something had shifted. She stood when she saw me, but her energy was different now. Less defensive. More uncertain. We need to stop this, she said softly. I placed my keys on the table carefully. Stop what? I asked. This, she said, gesturing between us. Everything is falling apart. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. It is. Her voice lowered. I didn't know it would go this far. That sentence. That attempt at distance from responsibility. I studied her for a moment. And for the first time, I didn't see a villain. I saw someone trapped inside something she didn't fully understand. But that didn't change the outcome. I believe you, I said. She blinked slightly. You do. I nodded again. But belief doesn't cancel consequences. Her expression tightened. You're enjoying this, she said suddenly. That caught my attention. I stepped closer. Enjoying it, I repeated quietly. Yes, she said more firmly now. All this control, all this calculation. You're not the same person anymore. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said something honest. I stopped being the same person the day I came home early. Silence hit again, heavier this time, because she understood that line better than anything else. That night I didn't sleep, but I wasn't searching through documents anymore. I was preparing, because Saira Malik wasn't someone who acted randomly. She built systems, which meant this wasn't just about me. It was about scale. I opened a secure chat with Harris. Me. I need everything on Zion's offshore partners. Seconds later, Harris. Already working. But there's something you should know. My chest tightened slightly. He sent a second file. Title. Trigger point asset movement. I opened it, and my eyes narrowed, because the entire structure was shifting. Fast. Unusually fast. Assets were being pulled out of shell accounts, transferred into liquidation channels, like someone had detected exposure, like someone knew we were close. And then I saw the timestamp. It started 2 hours after I returned home today. I leaned back slowly, so they knew, or someone inside knew. And then my phone lit up. Unknown number again. One message. You're not the only one watching. This time, I didn't just read it. I traced it immediately, but the signal bounced through 7 layers before disappearing. Professional. Clean. Intentional. Which meant one thing. We were no longer investigating them. They were now actively managing us. At 3:14 a.m., my house alarm system beeped once. A soft notification. Motion detected outside. I stood up immediately, walked to the window, and looked down. A car was parked across the street. Engine off. Lights dim. But inside, someone was sitting. Watching. Not hiding anymore. Watching openly. As if they wanted me to know the game had escalated. And then my phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a location. Pinned. Marked. And labeled with a single word. Truth. I stared at it for a long time. Then I grabbed my jacket. Because whatever this was, it was no longer behind the scenes. It was calling me forward. And I had finally reached the point where ignorance was no longer an option. Only truth. Or war. The location pinned on my phone didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a verdict. A single word on the screen kept pulsing in my mind. Truth. I stood in my room for a long time, jacket half on, phone in hand, listening to the silence of the house. For the first time since everything began, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel emotional. I felt ready, because something inside me had already crossed the point of return. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Acceptance of what I had to become. The drive took 40 minutes. The city looked different at this hour. Empty roads, flickering streetlights, and the distant hum of a world that didn't care what I was about to uncover. The pin led me outside an old riverside warehouse district. Abandoned structures stood like broken teeth against the dark sky. The wind carried the smell of rusted metal and damp concrete. No signs of life, only silence. But I knew better than to believe silence meant safety. The warehouse door was already open. That alone told me I wasn't being ambushed. I was being expected. Inside, a single light hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly as if the air itself was uneasy. And beneath it stood Saira Malik, exactly as the file had shown. Calm, composed, like none of this had ever been out of control. You came, she said softly. I stepped inside slowly. I had no choice, I replied. She tilted her head slightly. Everyone has a choice. Most just choose too late. My eyes scanned the space. Empty. No guards. No chaos. Just her. So this is it? I asked. The truth. She smiled faintly. No, she said. This is the beginning of your understanding of it. That answer irritated something inside me. But I stayed still. Because I had learned patience now. Zion, I said. Lena. Armin. All of it. You built this. She nodded. Not built, she corrected. Corrected. That word made my jaw tighten. Corrected what? Her expression changed slightly, less cold now. More reflective. You, she said. The silence after that sentence felt heavier than anything before it. I let it sit. Then I spoke quietly. Explain. She walked slowly toward the edge of the light. Do you know what your company would become in 5 years? She asked. I didn't answer. You would scale, expand internationally, merge with firms you don't fully understand. And in the process, she looked at me directly, you would destroy dozens of smaller systems without even realizing it. I frowned. That's business. She nodded. Yes, she said. And power always tells itself that story. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Syra continued. Zion Khan lost everything to you in a previous deal. Armin was never your friend. He was placed close to you through recommendation layers. And Lena, she paused slightly. Lena was emotional leverage. That hit harder than I expected, but I didn't react outwardly. Not anymore. And you? I asked quietly. What are you? She smiled again, but this time it didn't feel cold. It felt tired. I'm the consequence department, she said. My phone buzzed again. Harris. I finally checked it. Harris, you need to see the real ownership structure. Now. A file loaded automatically. My eyes scanned it quickly, and then everything shifted again. Because the final layer wasn't Syra alone. There was a parent entity, a global investment trust, and one signature at the top. Not hers, not Zion's, not anyone I expected. It was a name I hadn't seen in years. A name tied to my earliest startup rejection. A board that had once crushed my first business attempt before I rebuilt everything from scratch. They had never left. They had only waited. My breathing slowed. So this was never personal, I said quietly. Syra nodded. No, she said. It was structural. I looked at her directly. And Lena, for the first time, her expression softened. She didn't understand the full design, she admitted. She thought she was protecting herself. My hands tightened slightly. And Armin, a pawn who thought he was a player. I closed my eyes briefly. Everything I thought was betrayal was something far more calculated. But then something inside me settled. Because clarity removes emotion and replaces it with direction. I opened my eyes again. So what happens now? I asked. Syra studied me carefully. That depends on you, she said. A long silence followed. Then she added, you can expose everything. Burn it all. But you will lose your life's work in the process. I nodded slowly. Or you take control of what's left and become part of the system you tried to avoid. That was the real offer. Not revenge. Not justice. Transformation. I understood now. This was never about betrayal. It was about selection. They weren't destroying me. They were testing what I would become after destruction. Behind me, footsteps echoed. I turned slightly. Lena stood at the entrance. Her face pale. Eyes wide. She had followed me. Or maybe she had been brought here too. I didn't know it was like this, she said immediately. Her voice cracked. I swear I didn't know. I looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, I believed her. But belief didn't erase consequences. It only clarified them. Syra spoke again. The decision is simple, she said. I looked at her. She continued, walk away and disappear, or step forward and redefine everything you think power is. I thought about everything. The betrayal, the manipulation, the truth buried under layers of systems and people. And finally, I understood something important. Forgiveness was never the opposite of revenge. Control was. I stepped forward, not toward anger, not toward destruction, toward understanding. I don't want to burn it, I said quietly. Syra watched me closely. I want to own it. A silence followed. Then she smiled, for the first time genuinely. Good, she said. Then you're ready. Months later, the headlines never explained what really happened. Companies restructured quietly. Names disappeared from boards. New leadership appeared where old systems collapsed. And one name began circulating in financial circles with increasing weight. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a strategist. No longer reacting, no longer breaking, only building. And somewhere in that rebuilt world, Lena watched from a distance. Armin disappeared completely. Zion vanished from business records. And Syra Malik remained unseen, but in control. Because the truth was never about who betrayed whom. It was about who understood the system well enough to survive it. And me. I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. I evolved.